And now for our feature presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Botching It Up podcast. Every bruise, bump, and botch. Wrestling, you've been put on notice. Let's get ready to ramble!
You know this is lucky number 13.
Well, it's also Survive If I Let You 13.
So, what?
Taz's thing for ages was the number 13. I'm not really sure why. I
remember his logo when he debuted against Kurt Angle.
I don't see him as a beacon of luck, do you?
Was it just that he had like 13 suplexes or something?
I thought it was Kurt Angle's gimmick. I don't know. Brian Cage sees him as a sign of good luck anyway. That's all that counts.
Right, so on this podcast, we both had a lot of fun watching some of the other guys' favorite matches, and we'll talk about them. But I think let's get NXT TakeOver out of the way first.
You want to get this done.
Because I think both of us are pretty down on this show.
I feel more sorry for you than me, because I did say on the predictions that I wasn't really looking forward to this show because nothing had been booked properly. It all felt a bit undercooked, a bit thrown together, and it kind of was that in execution.
I'm starting to think that this isn't WWE's fault, and it's just my fault for getting too excited about these shows. They let me down like a lot, like a ton with Money in the Bank. I was super stoked for that. And then this one, I wasn't as disappointed, but yeah, it wasn't as fun as I was hoping it to be.
I think the problem is as well that, at least from my perspective, I don't know whether the quality's changed. You go into a takeover expecting the best event of the month, don't you?
Yeah, man. Takeovers are meant to be kind of the best WWE has to offer. And this, I mean, it was still the best thing they've put out in the last month or so, but it wasn't great.
Did you watch the pre-show?
I watched the first 5 minutes of it, but there was no match, so I just didn't bother.
The only thing that I wanted to mention about the pre-show is that they've got like a podcaster called Pat McAfee. I don't know him. I assume he's like a sports journalist.
He's the guy with the crazy hair?
No, he's like a biggish dude that sits at a desk in his own room, and he's got like a weird painting, like a Silent Hill weirdness painting on the back of his wall. No, literally all I wanted to mention was that I like the fact that at least NXT has like normal people contributing to talk, just makes it give it like a sense of reality. That's literally all. That's the only thing that you missed from the pre-show. That and Sam Roberts.
That's the guy I'm thinking of the podcast, isn't it? The one with the crazy hair.
Well, the hair's slowly going back and back and back. Yeah, but
well. So NXT TakeOver in your house. The first 10 minutes of this show, what I thought was actually pretty cool. So we opened up with the old school branding, full of nostalgia, and then we come in and it's got the old set with the houses on the stage, and then a live band kicks off the show, which I think has been long missing in wrestling. I love live music in wrestling, especially rock music.
You've missed out Todd Pettingill.
Yeah, sorry. I thought that was after the live rock band. But yeah, we had that. And then there was rumors that Michael Hayes wasn't meant to be the ring announcer as well, but apparently he didn't want to do that.
Well, they still got him in as a reference. They had good old Doc Hendricks on the wall that Johnny Gargano kissed before coming into the Keith Lee match. I think that Triple H getting the theme tune to play the band that do the theme tune to play the song on their opening show makes it feel like just more big time, whether I like the music or not. And it's very rare these days that wrestling even bothers to try and link itself to popular culture. And again, regardless of the band, the very fact that they try and do this every show makes it feel like we're not trapped in a weird little wrestling bubble. And I like that. It's nice.
Yeah, and then the set was awesome, don't you think?
Yeah, it was really... See, I don't think that you had the same experience with this as me, because one of my first videotapes was actually in your house from like 1996. So I remember this set vividly, and I remember Todd Pettingill especially because I had an extra feature on the videotape back then of the equivalent of the pre-show where he's just walking around like a really bad dress set of a swimming pool and things like that, and he's just having a chat with Sonny and having a chat with like a random jobber. Cool to see that they put the effort in with this.
No, I don't really remember him, but I got that same nostalgic kick because when I was a kid and me and my stepbrothers would watch wrestling tapes, we were watching during the late Attitude Era and we couldn't afford to buy Stone Cold and The Rock at Royal Rumble or whatever, so we used to buy In Your House tapes. So some of the earliest shows that I watched are those shows as well.
It's the same thing with me, man. The Attitude tapes were like 20 quid, whereas the In Your House tapes were like a fiver, right?
And if you could find them at the car boot, it was like 50p.
Yeah. That's how that's how I picked up like SummerSlam '92 and got into that stuff while you were watching tits.
So the show kicks off with the 6-man tag. We both said in the predictions that this match felt a bit pointless, and it turns out it was. I mean, it was an okay match, but it didn't deserve to be on a takeover, much like probably most of these matches. It would have fit on maybe a regular NXT.
Also, like, felt like the whole point of the match wasn't the point of the match. It's like a weird swerve where the people that were added as extra bodies became the match, and Maya Yim and Candice LeRae didn't actually touch each other much, and then just fought into the back without any sort of fanfare.
They didn't do anything until that final bit where they fought off into the back, and then nothing happened of that. We didn't follow them. We didn't see them later. Yeah, it felt like Shotzi Blackheart got quite a prominent position in this match, and it felt I think they re-debuted her a few weeks ago. She's been around for a while, but she came back recently, and I think they're trying to put her in the spotlight. But she didn't come off looking like the best in this match either.
Well, her can I just say her tank is stupid.
Oh yes, I hate it.
I hate the tank, man. It's ridiculous. It's like something that you would have Hurricane Helms coming out in.
Have you seen the really dope promo with her? And she sat on a real tank with like a German helmet, and she's just doing like a badass promo, like, "Oh, I'm gonna beat you up, whatever." Sat on a proper tank.
Well, I assume that she's going for the tank girl vibe.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that promo is crazy cool, and it feels great with the real tank there. And then when she drives in this toy like kids tank, it just undermines the whole edginess of it.
She's where I got the idea to do Sheamus in a go-kart. I just saw her on TV and decided to swap characters. Did notice, it's rare that I notice something about somebody that when I don't really know who they are, but she's got a beautiful submission. It's a reverse underhook, and it's so nicely put on. It's some of the best submission I've seen in a very long time. So I did like that. And I know that you're sick of me saying this on any show that we watch, but why do we seemingly every show, why do we have loads of people that take turns to jump on each other?
And because there was a massive jumping spot later on the card, I feel like they should have calmed it down on earlier on the card. The height and the bigger spot later on in the night.
I don't understand it at all. I don't understand the excitement in it. It's literally, I remember when they first introduced this sort of stuff and it was one big spot and everyone went, whoa. And you could sort of escape the fact that people were queuing up for it. But now it is like a conveyor belt. You know, they go round in circles and take turns and nobody gets hurt and nobody lands on each other properly. And takes me completely out of anything I'm watching. And it seems to happen on every single show.
Yeah, it's not excitement anymore, is it? Because it just happens too much. I mean, and that goes into my note about this whole match. It was just a bit of a mess.
I saw some bright spots. Obviously, as I said, I liked the Blackheart submission. If she changed her character, alters her character a little bit, I think she'd make a good face. As I said on the predictions as well, I still think that Raquel Gonzalez, I think she has a really bright future if she sort of changes up her look a little bit and stops looking like a massive Sonya Deville.
So the winner was Tegan Nox, which was the only woman in this match I didn't know. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe it puts her in the spotlight.
Well, I read up that Dakota Kai and Tegan Nox have been having quite the feud over the past couple of months. So basically, this match we went into the match thinking it was Candice and Mia, and it actually became a story of Dakota Kai versus Tegan Nox, which is fair enough. But as you said previously, I don't really understand why this has got the position over that cage pit or the cruiserweight final or anything else you could have put on there.
Or maybe those two women went into business for themselves. They stole the spotlight.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I kind of felt like it was booked like that, bro.
So next up, we get Finn Balor versus Damian Priest, which I really enjoyed this match, but I think I shouldn't have done because I don't think it was that good.
Well, one thing on this show that I was going to say was that nobody's match on this pay-per-view will make their greatest hits. But that's not quite true, because I think that this match, while not making Finn Balor's greatest hits, will make Damian Priest's greatest hits. It's the best I've seen him. And I don't think you're completely in the wrong, because I actually too really did enjoy this match. It was actually my close second, maybe second, third favorite match on the show, depending on where you put Gargano and Lee. But really wasn't expecting the early domination of Balor by Priest. And I thought by playing into the old sort of face heel dynamic and then the beat up and the comeback, it was a really good match. It was a really good match for Damian Priest, and it was a really good match for my expectation level.
I mean, I was surprised that Damian Priest, formerly known as Punishment Martinez, even got signed up to NXT. I didn't really rank him that highly when he was in Ring of Honor. So I don't think he's destined for huge things here. That's why I thought in the predictions that Finn Balor was going to get this as a launching pad for him to go onto more of a main event program.
He really feels like a face Corbin. He's just a big guy that seems like he can be a reliable hand, but not necessarily involved in his own character. Like, he's one of those guys that is told that they're a certain character, so they go out and play it, despite the fact that you never believe them for a second.
Yeah.
know?
What did you think of Balor? Because I think his persona right now is a lot more similar to his Japanese style back when he was in New Japan with the gun salute. He's meant to be he's meant to be an anti-hero, but he's got a much more edgier feel to him.
It's the best I've seen Balor for quite a while, because he's obviously a much smaller guy than Priest, but I never really noticed it. And he has got this sort of, as you say, he's got this slightly vicious feel to him.
Yeah, I love him like this.
It feels a little bit more on the edge, and it's a lot less cartoon character Finn Balor that I'm used to on the main WWE promotion.
Yeah, he just feels angry and more gritty, and I think more believable in kind of the dirty boxing style of fighting.
But were you expecting him to sell this much in this match? Because I was quite surprised by it.
Balor sells like crazy for Priest, and Priest does not return the favor at all.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. I thought that still step bump onto his back looked absolutely horrible.
Yeah, so
Made me think of Shawn Michaels nearly having a career-ending injury on the back of that coffin.
yeah, I think he missed it slightly because it looked like his back hit the corner of the steps. I think he was meant to land like a backdrop flat on the steps, but he missed it slightly. It looked like it really hurt.
Yeah, it looked like it could have easily gone a lot worse.
So apparently this is Finn Balor's 11th win on an NXT takeover, which is a fun fact.
I read something about this. Doesn't that make him have the most wins on a takeover in total?
Oh, I don't know. They didn't say that. They just said it was his 11th win, which is quite a lot.
Well, I assume that you're right anyway, regardless. I think that they're heading towards slowly crawling back into a Balor Cole program again. And I think that will be Cole's last program on NXT TV. This was a good match, I thought. Not a great one.
A decent end to a mediocre mini feud. Nothing special.
I sort of feel like you should have started the show with this one.
What, and just not had the 6 women?
Or if you want to put the 6 women in, place it somewhere else. I thought this was a much better opener to kick things off and get things going.
Yeah, it would have been. But I thought the placing of all the matches on this card were a little bit whack. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, another point I was going to raise with you actually just now. I'm not sure whether it's that the pacing was just bad or because they had like a load of weird matches. You know, they had a load of strange situations. They didn't really know where to put anything.
Takeover's quite famous for having more of a Japanese style pacing their shows in that they just keep having a better match after the next one and just slowly build kind of the epicness of their matches rather than having like a toilet break match in the middle of.
Well, that didn't really happen for me this pay-per-view.
So our next match is Keith Lee versus Johnny Gargano.
Don't forget the Ico Pro advert.
Yes.
I popped hard for this.
There was a few nostalgia-esque adverts across the whole show.
I was watching this and towards the end of a Monday afternoon, my girlfriend's getting pretty sick of wrestling being on television. So whatever's being watched on Monday, which usually means that she ends up watching the shit. Like she sees SmackDown, and then after
Right.
SmackDown, she's had her fill, which is exactly when I sort of go into AEW. But anyway, she wasn't paying any attention, just turned round and saw the WWE Biscuits advert. And she was just like, wrestling's so fucking weird,
I
man.
really enjoyed these. These were funny.
No, but I don't think that she got that it was retro.
Right.
She,
Okay.
she just thought they were selling biscuits, and she thought that that was like non-ironic, the best they could have done to promote this ice cream biscuit.
Do they even still make these ice cream sandwich things? Like in
I hope
America,
so,
are they an
because
actual product?
that's what CM Punk fought his entire career to get back, wasn't it?
This is why these adverts made me laugh, because of all the CM Punk stuff about the ice cream sandwiches.
Well, this is what Drake Maverick got a contract for, to model the ice cream sandwiches again.
And he was the star of those adverts as well.
He was. This is the big money contract.
Okay, so what did you think of Keith Lee and Johnny Gargano?
I think I liked it more than you. I didn't really like the whole use of the house at all. I just thought, again, like, I hate things. I don't mind things when they're funny, but they make sense. When you're literally breaking my idea of realism and we go into CBBS territory,
Yeah.
I kind of say, well, you're just ruining my immersement in this. And to me, the whole basis of wrestling, whether it's comedy or not, is to be immersed at a certain point, and you can't really mix comedy with seriousness and have them both in at the same time if the audience isn't in on the joke.
Is this when Gargano starts the match by coming out of the house?
Well, it was that. I mean, and then he
And did you not like the spot later on where Keith Lee throws his head into the door and
again,
Gargano
no, that
tries-
wasn't the issue for me. The issue was Johnny Gargano running away like a scared heel,
Yeah.
and then not being able to unlock the entrance.
Yeah. See, this is a hard one for me because it was a bit corny and it wasn't well done. And I've said many times on this podcast that I really like, if you're going to put something somewhere or you're going to put something in a storyline, then use it and have a reason for it to be there. So I like the idea that in this match and in the main event, they used the set. So there was a reason for the set to be there. But at the same time in this match, it was just really poorly done.
If you really wanted this joke to happen, do it on a match that doesn't mean anything, you know? Do it on the opening women's match, for example. That's fine if you want to throw it out there. Not that I think it's a good idea in general. But, I mean, would you give this spot, for example, to Ciampa and Cross?
No, not at all.
No. So, I mean, and I know that Gargano and Lee's been built up in a slightly comedic way. That feud still feels serious at the end of the day because of the two competitors involved, right?
Yeah.
So I just don't see why you're using that gimmick for these guys.
Well, I just don't see why. I mean, this match was very overbooked, and there was a ton of shenanigans and craziness. I mean, these two could just put on a 5-star match. They could have an excellent, like, pure wrestling.
I've got here that it was a good match despite the booking.
Yeah, it was a good match. I liked it, but there was so much going on. It took away from the fact that these two are like the best in NXT, and they could really do something great.
But they did do something that you know I love, Ben, that I get really excited about. Working a limb.
Yeah. Well, they actually worked too.
Yeah, they had the eye and the fingers, right?
Yeah, and I love the storytelling that Gargano kept going from one to the other because it wasn't helping him win the match.
And Lee sold them throughout. He sold both.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the sort of thing I want to see. And it just felt like a shame because I feel like if you got rid of the stupid house stuff that took me out of the match and ruined the pace, in my opinion, and we had to restart again, and Lee and Gargano had to sort of build the momentum again to get where they wanted to go. I think if you'd taken that out, given them 5 more minutes and concentrated on that story of Gargano being the small heel, because I love a match where the face is bigger than the heel, because it makes the heel have to be really dastardly and scheming in order and work smart in order to try and get the win. And they had
And he did do that well.
They had it in their hands perfectly, but just by this overbooking, they ruined what could have been a really, really great match.
Because at the end of the match, we have Candice LeRae and Mia Kim come in, and again, they come out and they don't really do anything. It causes a distraction, which then we get the key in the eye. that isn't even really the finish of the match. That leads to another sequence of them both trying to do their finishes and can't get more than a 2 count, and then Keith Lee eventually wins it.
I thought Maya and Candice LeRae on this show was really weird in general.
They were just there and they didn't do anything twice.
They had a match which was based around them. Were in the ring together for about half a minute, feuded it, fought each other into the back. Then they turn up in this match. They've obviously changed clothes, had a shower. So I guess at some point they would have stopped fighting. So then they come out again to fight each other again.
And yeah, and it caused a minor distraction to allow for that key spot, but other than then we didn't see them again.
Hey, another thing I've noticed is Keith Lee does not like selling eye spots, does he? I didn't even notice on NXT last Wednesday that he had actually had apparently a key gouged into his eye, because Keith Lee just no-sold it completely.
Commentary kind of played it up a little bit.
Yeah, Keith Lee ain't wearing no eye patch. He's not going for it. He's not interested.
Although bump of the night goes to Keith Lee doing a running shoulder barge, sending Johnny Gargano through the plexiglass
Yeah, that was pretty
window
cool.
over the guardrail. That was a lot of fun.
I don't know again whether you noticed, but this entire card from top to bottom had a lot of outside stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that was the only inventive spot. But then also, I had a problem with the use of the outside, not just because of repetition, but because Priest Balor, Lee Gargano, I think Ciampa Cross, the ref is never counting to 10, man, or he counts and he gives up and he just lets them fight for a little while until they're ready to go again inside. If you can't follow the basic rules of a fake fighting tournament or a match, then the rules don't mean anything. And if the rules don't mean anything, then nothing means anything.
Yeah, this is a problem everywhere at the moment, it seems like. Nobody does the 10 count. And the simplest solution would be to adopt the Japanese style of having a 20 count. I mean, I know it sounds silly as an American viewer, but in Japan, they've been doing that since the beginning of time. That's normal for them. And it just allows for extra time outside.
Well, I remember back in the day when they had a really heated match that they wanted to go outside, but they also had the problem of it not being a no disqualification match. And actually, it happened as well in the match that you gave me this week, Cody versus Dustin from Double or Nothing 2019. And the way they explain it away is the ref doesn't want to see it go out like that.
Yeah.
You know, because this is a high profile feud. This is like the consummation of a 6-month storyline. And the ref flies it because, God damn it, there's going to be a winner, you know?
Yeah, AEW does this a lot, which I used to like at first, but now they've done it so much that it's kind of gone the other way and it's a bit silly. Every title match and every high profile match, the commentary will say the ref doesn't want to have a DQ and they don't want to have a count out. So basically, we're having a no count out match.
When you've got Cody versus Dustin and Earl Hebner says, you know what? I'm just going to let him go for a little while. That's understandable, isn't it? I mean, it's Cody Rhodes versus Dustin Rhodes in the main event of the first pay-per-view of AEW. When it's Damian Priest versus Finn Balor on the second match on a show which has gotten 2 weeks build, you can't really say, well, the ref wants to keep it going because this match is really important.
Oh, WWE have no excuse because they never explain stuff like this. I just meant that AEW at least tried to explain this, but even their explanation now is not good enough because they just do it too often. That basically there's no rules in any of their important matches because they do it too often. And like you said, if you're not going to follow the rules that amount of time, there basically is no rules anytime.
Which makes the whole concept of it pointless.
Yeah. Anyway. So we'll move on to the next match. Adam Cole versus Velveteen Dream. And oh my god, it's just another B-movie clusterfuck again.
Dude, I've got the word trash. I can just looking at my notes. I've got the word trash 4 times, the word shit 3 times, and wrong turn 5 once.
What's the point in this? I felt like the only reason they did this was to show off a really cool monster truck. That was the only reason to be outside in a parking lot. Nothing else they did had any reason or rhyme. And then the only spot that required them to be in a parking lot was an Uber car pulling up and asking them if someone called an Uber, which is just so dumb. It's not funny. It's just not funny, is it?
Also, the Uber driver knows who's called them.
Just so
Like,
dumb.
I'm sorry. I know I do this too often. I try and take it on a level of reality that they represent to me, but even on that basic idea, it fails because the Uber driver would not know who called them.
Oh man, this is do you know?
I mean, we already talked on the predictions, right? That this match seemed pointless, seemed shoehorned in, and had no real purpose to the two combatants as to why it was happening there and what the need was for it to be in a car park, considering neither Adam Cole nor Velvet Dream suited a backlot brawl or needed a backlot brawl.
Well, I guess Adam Cole requested it because he had a dope monster truck and wanted to show off.
Yeah, because
He's just flexing.
he's got small man syndrome apparently.
He's just flexing on us. That's all it is.
But it's a bit of a shitty car if you don't even bother to get into it to run away because it's too big to move out.
Okay.
About halfway in, he just went and got another car because he was like, "Yeah, I can't move that thing."
Well, this was dumb as well. He gets into a car to run away, and then Dream starts going crazy with a baseball bat, smashing it up. And Adam Cole looks scared inside the car when he could just reverse and back up. Why does he stay scared in a car and wait for Dream to get him instead of just driving off?
But we already knew this match was pointless, had no reason to it being in the placing that it was. But I didn't realize how lacking in the execution this would be. I don't know what you thought of it aesthetically, but this was all the close-ups with the car lights are really unpleasant to watch. Things were either too dark or too bright.
Yep.
The actual crowd sounds bored and dead, like they've been waiting until midnight in the rain to film it, which is exactly what happened.
The crowd was almost non-existent. It took away from the match.
The idea of it being filmic by having these car lights, it was like the ugliest thing I've ever seen, which is why I said this shit is like Wrong Turn 5. I've seen Wrong Turn 5, I've watched it, I don't ever recommend it to anybody. And they had basically the same set with the same level of lighting.
Do we know if this was shot at Full Sail or was it shot at the Performance Center?
This was shot in the car park of Full Sail,
Right.
and the pay-per-view was also shot in Full Sail.
Because I don't know if you know, but Full Sail is a massive university for film and TV. So when I was watching this and all those buildings that were like behind the cars, I immediately looked at them and was like, those buildings are as fake as fuck. So I thought we were filming on a set at Full Sail, which I think we were.
The
whole thing looked fake.
I shook my head as soon as I saw the first 5 seconds of this, and I couldn't believe how stupid I was for thinking that the Velveteen Dream would win and end a year-long reign in this match.
Yeah, I mean, if a year-long reign had ended here, I think that would have been it. I would have given up on this shit.
What do you think of the car windscreen smash? Because that was the big moment.
Yes, this was the big moment at the end where they're both up on a ladder. Dream kind of punches Cole to fall back onto the windscreen. I mean, it was fine. It was like the only interesting spot or bump on the entire match.
Another thing with WWE is typical WWE. I don't understand why their references are always behind mainstream culture. Like, you had Velveteen Dream looked pretty cool from what I could see of him in this match. But he came out dressed as Tegan Knox from The Walking Dead. People gave up with The Walking Dead about 5 years ago.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, I mean, Walking Dead's ratings now have dropped dramatically. Everybody in the world used to watch it, but everybody gave up about 4 seasons ago, and nobody cares about it anymore. And it's just one of those little things that WWE seems to do to me continually. They find something and play on it about 5 years after it's already over. I don't know why they do this. I don't understand that how no one in the entire company can be up to date with current popular culture. There must be somebody.
I was just going to say Vince is like 5 years behind on pop culture, but Vince didn't even book this show. So
yeah,
it's not even that.
Sometimes it's a good thing. Triple H being into his heavy rock and getting the live bands and doing Download Festival. I mean, that's retro, but it works. It's good. But there's other times where they're just WWE feel like the old man's product because they just never have their finger on the pulse, ever.
Yeah, very true.
The only thing I liked about this match was I thought the finish was good at saving face for Dream.
What, with all the chairs in the ring?
Yeah.
Where they do the Canadian Destroyer onto the chairs.
There's one thing I have to say about this entire pay-per-view, pretty much, apart from the match we're going to get up to now. I thought that they saved face a lot with a lot of guys. I thought that they got the people that they wanted to over and to win, but they also didn't make anybody look bad in the process. Like Damian Priest came out better from this pay-per-view than I've ever seen him before. Gargano didn't look bad, and the Velveteen Dream, I mean, as bad as this match was, he didn't look bad against Cole.
Yeah, no one looked bad, and this match was awful because it was just another one of these B movie matches that didn't work. But I mean, the rest of the card was mediocre. It was fine. No one looked crap.
Can we just go back a little second here, and because I can't even remember. I've blocked this match out of my head, and I never want to see it ever again. And I couldn't be bothered to even look up the results. Did Dexter Lumis kidnap 3 members of the Undisputed Era?
Right. So Dexter Lumis slides out from under the ring, which he's done before. So he just brawls with them and he throws them into the trunk of his car and drives off.
How many people did he have in his car?
He threw 2 people into what looked like a small sedan. I think you could barely fit one person in that. Really.
So you half beat 2 people up, and then put them 2 versus 1 in your car without taping them up.
Yeah. So it's gonna be fun to see the outcome of that.
Man, in conclusion, I never want to see this match again. And I thought that Ken Shamrock and Sami Callihan fighting to cowboy music in a dimly lit back area of Impact was a lot better.
God, I forgot about that. That was shit as well.
It was a lot better than this.
It was better than this. Was just dumb. It wasn't even shit. It was just silly. It's just nonsense. I don't know why they did.
Yeah, really well, I mean, I can't be that disappointed by it because I told you on the predictions I was not looking forward to this match. I've only ever seen good Adam Cole matches, and I've only ever seen good Velveteen Dream matches. So it was quite humbling to realize that even the best wrestlers can be involved in absolute shite.
I like to pretend these B-movie things aren't matches. They're just like extended promos or whatever. Like I don't consider. So I don't let it take away from me wanting to watch Adam Cole in the future again, you know?
I mean, I guess I'm sure they did that. You can never fault the people in these matches for the way that it comes out, really.
Yeah, but you can, because even if you're going to have a parking lot brawl, all they did was punch each other and throw each other off a couple of walls or off the cars. They didn't do anything exciting apart from the windscreen bump. They didn't do...
What really are you supposed to do, though?
Well, I like open a door and throw it into a guy's head, or do a suplex on top of a car, or jump off the car with a diving elbow, or there's tons of stuff you could do with a car. Or when one of the cars moving, like throw him onto the bonnet and then he slides up. All they did was throw punches around the cars. They didn't do anything interesting.
I really hope that this match wasn't Triple H's reply to AEW. Because if it was, then that's a very bad sign for NXT.
Yeah, they failed, definitely. Right, let's get off this. Let's get on to Ciampa versus Karrion Kross.
A lot more interested to hear your opinion on this than mine. Because you've been watching Ciampa for a long time.
I didn't like it because it annoyed me. Ciampa didn't really get any offense in except for a few punches and kicks and one DDT, which would have been fine if the match went for like 1 or 2 minutes and Karrion Kross just buried him. That would have been fine. But because it went longer, Ciampa just looked weak and unable to land anything. And then Karrion Kross kept on, like, his facial expressions were really pissing me off because every time Ciampa would throw a punch, Karrion Kross would get like mad angry, but not in a cool, menacing way, like a 5-year-old.
Yeah, he looked like a manga character, didn't he?
Yeah, just like he was a 5-year-old having a hissy fit that he wasn't winning the game.
I thought this one was really weird. First of all, Cross's entrance is already getting old.
Yeah, I'm already bored of this shit. How have they ruined... Yeah. And it's like his only thing. He has no other character trait apart from his wife singing his entrance.
Well, this goes into what I wanted to say. I learned from this match that his finishes are a chokehold and an F5.
Is it an F5? Isn't it slightly different?
It was literally an F5. It was exactly the exact same way in the exact same mechanism that Brock Lesnar does it.
Right.
I couldn't believe it when I saw it.
So is this guy meant to be the next Brock? Is that what we're getting once Brock retires?
Well, I don't really know, but the weirdest thing about this match is that you hit the nail on the head earlier. It didn't go long, but it didn't go short. And I was just sitting there, like, I know Ciampa's a big deal. I was sitting there watching Killer Cross carrying Cross now. But I was sitting watching Cross put a headlock on Ciampa. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, why are we having a 2008 Randy Orton match? Like, no, but seriously, they
Yeah.
had like a minute or two where they just had very basic headlocks and holds. I'm like, I don't fucking understand any of this, because Cross is supposed. If you're gonna put Cross as like monster, just squash Ciampa. And if you want Ciampa to look good, why are you having Cross put him in a headlock? I just didn't get it.
Yeah, I feel either they needed it just to be a 1-minute match where Cross lands 3 moves, and then Ciampa could save face by having a promo in a month's time saying, "Yeah, he got me off guard. I didn't get any moves in, and he got me with like his killer awesome move. He's unscouted because he's new or whatever, so I wasn't ready for him." And then they could have a match in the future. So Ciampa still stays strong in a loss, or they have a 20-minute just fucking brawl and they just go for it, and both of them look crazy, and both of them are like sweating, bleeding, whatever, knocking 7 levels of shit out of each other. But it was neither. It was in the middle. It was a really crappy 7-minute. It tried to be a back and forth match, but it wasn't going back and forth enough to make either of them look interesting.
And that's the thing, man. This is not the match for stalling spots. Like you said, have a 2-minute squash or have a all-out 25-minute war. There's not even a crowd. Like, there's no need for stalling spots in wrestling at all right now, let alone in a match as important to both people as this.
And it's pre-taped, so I mean, if they run out of energy, they can kind of just cut out the bits where they slow down anyway.
Oh, I heard that they're actually using the speakerphone in the performance center at the moment. Just a very brief detour. I read a report that MVP in a script on Monday Night Raw called the performance center crowd NXT superstars, and Kevin Dunn, the producer, shouted over the speakerphone to do it again, and this time call them performance center.
No way!
Yeah,
That's fantastic. It's like a proper little TV set now.
yeah. And
I love it.
they also stopped Baron Corbin and Otis on SmackDown and made them redo a bit of it because they wanted Baron Corbin to give Otis 4 spine busters as opposed to 3.
Mate, why don't they do this anyway? Why does wrestling need to be live? It just adds a whole level of headache for the production team.
I think it just comes from that paranoia from the Eric Bischoff days where Bischoff used to give away the results on TV live. That's all it comes from. There's no need for it now. I don't think people are especially excited about the fact that it's live as opposed to the fact that it's taped.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't even mean like batch taping like indies would do. 1 month shooting 6 months worth of TV. But if they shot it like the night before, or even on the same day, 3 hours before the broadcast, and then they can tidy up mistakes here and there, or they could change a few camera angles so we don't see botches, and they could just clean up their product. It would just make, I think, the production look so much better because I mean, these guys aren't actors. Most of their promos full deaf and are really crap. So they could really clean it up with it not being live.
Bro, I think you're forgetting about the fact that they revise the script while they're live on air.
Yeah, so that again, I mean, they could. Whatever.
Anyway, yeah, Cross Ciampa, you didn't like it. Thought that Cross looked good. I mean, for what they want him to look like. But I think that's more to the credit of Mauro Ranallo and Beth Phoenix than the actual match.
Yeah.
Because they really played it. I don't know whether you noticed, but they really played into Ciampa being this really hard to beat big time dude just before the match started. At the end of the match, both Mauro and Beth were kind of like, wow, I can't believe what we just watched.
Right.
Anyway, you got your main event.
Right, we're on to our main event, which was definitely my match of the show.
Same.
Was for you as well. This was fun. So Rhea Ripley, Io Shirai, and Charlotte Flair for the NXT Women's Championship. There was Malello said a little thing at the beginning of this match, and he said Rhea Ripley's been in, I didn't write this down. She's been in like 4 championship matches. Shirai's been in 2. Charlotte Flair has been in 66 championship matches.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, when you say that statistic, you can't even like.
I said to you a couple of weeks ago do you think that Charlotte is the new John Cena of WWE?
She is,
Yeah.
but not every time we talk about Charlotte Flair. I think you get annoyed that I don't like her on being on TV. I think Charlotte
No,
is.
no, no. I completely agree with your point. I don't want to see her on every show.
Yeah,
I wish that she'd stick to one show. I don't even want to. I don't want to tune in on into Raw and then see her on SmackDown. Let alone NXT.
yeah, I think she's one of the best women workers in WWE by a long mile. But when she's so overexposed and overused, she just gets boring.
Yeah, well, it's. I mean, what do you do with Big Star? You make people want to see them. You don't have Brock Lesnar on Raw and SmackDown also defending the NXT Championship at the same time.
I don't know if you watched last night's Raw yet, but she was on Raw against Asuka again.
I heard she beat Asuka.
Yeah. I'm starting to think that maybe we're seeing so much Charlotte because of Becky Lynch plans maybe having to get thrown away. Charlotte's maybe being shoehorned into whatever they had plans there.
No, I don't like the idea of it. Charlotte's great. She's a great hand. She's done everything. You had Shayna Baszler sitting there ages ago, looking like a fucking demon. You had her beat up the entire Elimination Chamber roster. She made everybody at the Elimination Chamber look like a jobber.
Yep.
And I thought, whoa, that's a pretty massive waste of talent. But I guess it's Shayna Baszler and they're doing something big with her. Whoa, where is she now?
And Bianca Belair, they brought up, like a month ago? And I don't actually think I've seen her on Raw since.
WWE don't have this excuse. Out of all of the wrestling promotions in North America, WWE do not have the excuse that they need Charlotte because Becky Lynch has gone. They have the deepest, most talented female roster, I think, in pretty much the entire world right now. They've got so many women that are getting better week by week or who are already good that everybody really likes. There's so many people that they can put in this position. They do not need Charlotte and they don't need fucking Nia Jax
Yep.
to be the top of the promotion when they've got so many other talented people.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think AEW would chop off their left nut to get some of the female workers.
Yeah.
Because they desperately need it.
Genuinely, even from what I've seen over the past couple of weeks from the little matches between Sonya Deville and Lacey Evans, they are improving every week. Lacey Evans wasn't someone that I particularly enjoyed because she got forced down my throat with Baron Corbin last year. She's come on leaps and bounds, man. And her and Sonya had a fucking great little program on SmackDown these past couple of weeks. And I actually got quite upset that they've moved Sonya back onto Mandy Rose now. I really think that Sonya Deville and Lacey Evans, based upon their work, actually deserved a pay-per-view match at Backlash.
I got annoyed that they threw away their final match on SmackDown the week before the pay-per-view.
Well, they're back up again now. They're back together.
When they had like one of the best kind of female feuds going at that point. Forgotten her name. What's the woman's name that had the pink hair and white in Riot Squad?
Oh, Liv Morgan.
Yeah, they were using her week in, week out at one point, and she was in a load of squash matches, and she's off TV all of a sudden. I know she's not the best worker, but it feels like any momentum she had, they just gave up.
I really don't know what they're doing with the women's division.
Nothing. They're just giving it all to Charlotte.
They've got a depth of a roster, and I will continue every week. This is my platform, goddammit. I will continue every week to sing the praises of Sonya Deville. And I get that Mandy Rose and her had a feud, but they blew that off, as you said, badly. And now they're bringing it back again, and Mandy Rose can't work. And Sonya Deville deserves actually better at this point. At the same time, man, you've got Bayley, who to me is the coronavirus MVP. I think Bayley's been absolutely solid week in, week out. She's made me laugh. She's had great matches. They've given her the women's tag team champions with Sasha Banks this week. That's fine. I don't mind that because it's still leading eventually to this Sasha Banks Bayley.
And God, what a slow burn that has been.
It has been.
For me, that's fantastic. I love slow burning storylines. I'm so excited for when they're finally going to blow up. I hope they save it almost until next WrestleMania now so they can have just one of the biggest female matches ever.
It's going to be great, and I really hope that they only pull the gun when they know that the time is right and there's going to be a massive crowd, because that angle is way too special now.
Maybe they're just going to waste it on a go-home show before the pay-per-view.
What I worry about is that this women's tag match on the pay-per-view at Backlash is just going to ignite there and then.
Yeah, possibly.
Because they've done such a good job of building slow. And now they're doing that classic pre-WrestleMania move where they get the two opponents of the WrestleMania main event to win the tag champs for a week and then fall out because they lost them.
Yeah, and then they split. Yeah, classic.
I think that the story that they've told with Bailey has been way more intelligent than that. It would be a shame if they fell out over the tag belts when they've sowed so many seeds that it didn't even need the tag belts in the first place.
I've always been a massive fan of Bailey. You've known this. She's been my favorite of the four horsewomen since when they first came up to the main roster. I always thought she was not better, but I always enjoyed her matches more than anyone else's. But yeah,
Yeah.
back to this thing. I'm just gonna say one more negative thing about this match, and then we can get on to that. It was actually a pretty good match. The standoff, when they do the announcing who's in the match, and they have the standoff in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
It felt really weird because there was three of them, and they were all facing the camera. They weren't facing each other, so they were awkwardly facing the camera and looking to their side or looking behind them. It was weird. It's a really weird standoff. Felt awkward.
I felt a bit awkward watching this, but I didn't really understand why. So thank you for clarifying why I felt uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was weird, wasn't it? I couldn't work it out for a minute, and then I realized it's because they're all fakely stood towards the camera rather than aggressively
Yeah.
standing up on each other. Yeah, and then after that, I thoroughly enjoyed the match.
Yeah, great match. This pay-per-view really needed it as well, I think. One thing I noticed in this match is Charlotte, Ripley, and Io Shirai. All three are so clean and crisp in everything they do. All of their maneuvers look like 100% so smooth and silky, They're really, all three of them are quite clearly really good wrestlers, especially considering Ripley's young age.
Saying that, they didn't stop either. It was constant. If one person was down, the other two kept going, and it felt like there was no breaks.
Yep.
So to say that it was so clean and crisp is actually quite amazing with the speed that they were going.
And there was only one or two spots in which they did the classic triple threat where somebody went out and you didn't see them for a couple of minutes. So perfectly coordinated that didn't feel fake.
No, it was fantastic. My favorite part of this entire match was a small thing. You might have even missed it. Charlotte Flair's got this banter going with the crowd. They're shouting abuse at her, and she keeps saying, how she built NXT and she deserves to be here. She just does like a DX suck it.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, that was great. I enjoyed that.
That was fantastic. I thought that was such a cool, badass thing for her to do.
While we're at it, shout out to earlier in the show, DX trying to use a computer as well. Did quite enjoy that.
Oh yeah, when they were on AOL chat rooms.
Yeah. It's one of the few WWE jokes that I actually chuckled at. Somebody actually got a picture up of every single time Shawn Michaels has been at a computer. It's now a running joke that he uses his index finger to type. Anyway, sorry.
I suppose you didn't like it, but I loved that Io Shirai climbed up one of the houses and did a big dive. That was fun.
Oh no, I thought that was cool, man. If you've got a spot and it doesn't feel forced, then I'm all for the spot.
And that's what I was saying with the earlier match. Should have calmed it down with suicide dive, so this one would have felt that much more bigger and important.
Mm-hmm. I thought also that this was the best finish I've seen for ages.
Finish was really creative. Rhea Ripley is in a figure four leg lock from Charlotte. Io comes in, does a moonsault onto Ripley and gets the pin, and Charlotte can't break up the pin because she's all locked up in her own figure four and can't break it up in time.
And obviously Ripley is not just taking a figure four, she's taking a figure eight, and she's also hit basically in the face by one of the most brutal moonsaults I've ever seen.
Yeah, her knees like land in her face.
Yeah, and the fact that she loses in a 3 count while not tapping out to the figure eight, in my opinion, makes her look like a badass too.
Yeah, it does, but she also kind of lost twice.
Yeah,
I mean, Charlotte was protected.
I do get what you mean, but I thought that Ripley was the one that was going to look weak here, and her taking best offense from both competitors and only then losing. I think they specifically made the point that Charlotte was doing a figure eight, not a figure four, because the figure eight's like where she evolves like a Pokemon.
Oh yeah, where she bridges up.
Yeah, that's the only thing that ever tapped out Asuka a long time ago. So I think that's Charlotte trying to give Ripley a rub, by not just doing the figure four.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, they could have done it in worse ways. Ripley looks better than just a straight up finish.
Also, really loved the confetti and the streamers and stuff at the end of this show for Io Shirai.
Yeah, that was really cool. I know NXT and Raw viewers are not separate; they're the same viewers. But in the creative's mind, if you really wanted to give one of the girls on NXT the strongest win, they should have got it over Charlotte, and then Charlotte goes off the Raw. I get they want to protect Charlotte to go on to the next program on a bigger show and a bigger program, but I felt like either of them would have got a better rub had Rhea Ripley not eaten the loss.
I don't really like the fact either that Charlotte is now moving back up to Raw to face Asuka without first having a rematch properly one-on-one with Rhea Ripley. So I think Rhea Ripley has really suffered from that WrestleMania match, despite whatever Triple H says. Ripley winning once from against Charlotte would have given her a lot of the momentum back that she lost on a very big stage.
Absolutely. I mean, at the moment, if Charlotte just goes back to Raw, her NXT run feels completely pointless. No need for it.
Yeah.
She won the belt and then she dropped it to a completely different person. So, like you said, there's no closure for Rhea Ripley. I mean, it feels weird that Io Shirai got the win.
Well,
It's like she was a paper champion, but she has more star power than the rest of them.
also, what options does Rhea Ripley really have now?
Rhea Ripley comes out of this not that great, I think.
I think she was booked strong in the actual match,
Yeah,
but
you're
I
right.
don't think it has good prospects for her immediate future. This show overall, where you're sitting on it, will you ever come back and watch anything else? Watch anything on the show ever again?
No.
No. All right.
Doesn't have that rewatchable factor that a lot of takeovers have.
I wasn't sure whether I was just in a bad mood because this just felt like a really bang average show for me, despite the fact that I could see that people were trying hard.
Just such a shame because takeovers have this reputation now of being such great, and this one had such a great premise. I really loved the branding of it and the whole nostalgia, and the matches were all just quite mediocre apart from a good main event.
Would you be interested in seeing In Your House themed show next year? I've read that Triple H said that if it's popular enough, he wants to bring it back yearly. But the whole sort of charm of this show was the joke.
It was good because of the world we're living in at the moment. It just fit perfectly.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll
Well,
see.
that was In Your House. So our segment this week is our matches that we've given each other to watch, because at the moment our theme is the greatest matches of all time, based upon said marketing by WWE. And I just wanted to read you some comments from Edge that he gave to ESPN regarding the upcoming match this Sunday.
Yeah,
I
go
want
on.
to hear your thoughts on them.
Okay.
Have you heard about this?
No, but I think I've heard somebody talk about this.
So ESPN were asked Edge his thoughts on WWE hyping the match as the greatest wrestling match ever. And he said, hey, Vince McMahon is a promoter and he's promoting, but it's like hyperbole. I mean, to me, the greatest match is not possible. So that takes that pressure out of my mind immediately. I just laughed because I didn't think it was serious. Then I realized fairly quickly it was. Then my reaction was, is this wise? Because anytime you say something the greatest ever beforehand, you're setting yourself up to failure. And I don't ever want to think that way. I need to think the opposite of that. I can't count the court of public opinion. I need to do and be proud of the work that I put in. All I can do is take it as if this is all just a bonus and in a weird way a compliment, or it's a giant rib. I don't know.
Oh, now I feel bad for him.
He goes on to say, so I don't look at it in terms of a contest. Will it measure up to Steamboat versus Savage, or will it measure up to Michaels versus Taker? All I can do is measure up against myself, and especially at this juncture in my career, I'm just happy to be out there. This shouldn't even be happening, let alone for the company, and let's call it straight. Vince, to think that he can bill this as the greatest match ever. Would I have preferred they not build it as that? Absolutely. But I also know there are times where hills get dug in the sand and there's no changing it.
Well, it's good to know him and probably Randy Orton aren't buying into this bullshit as well. I feel bad for them now. All wrestlers always want to put on like the greatest match that they can. I feel bad that they know that they're definitely not going to hit the marker that's been set for them.
I also wanted to talk to you really about how wrestling podcasts are run by wrestling fans, and we talk about wrestling critically despite the fact that we've never been in the business, and a lot of the time we do this for fun because we enjoy talking to each other about it. We never expect our opinions and our thoughts to actually transfer into wrestlers' thoughts. He completely agrees with people saying that Vince McMahon is booking something that is going to be a massive disappointment to everyone, and he kind of has to deal with that, even though he'd rather not.
Yeah, I mean, he's been set up for a failure, and it's not even his fault. It's not wrestling related, but it's a funny anecdote. Wrestlers, obviously, they are performers and they want to do a good job. I remember in an interview, Ricky Gervais said about directing Robert De Niro. After the shot was taken, if you don't know filmmaking, usually the director would pat all the actors on the back and say, "Good job, here's what we did right, here's what he did wrong." And he said nothing to De Niro, and he congratulated all the other actors. And then as they all walked off, De Niro came up to him really, really nervous and anxious. And he's like, "Ricky Gervais, what did I do wrong?" And Ricky Gervais is like, "You did nothing wrong. You're fucking Robert De Niro. It was perfect." And he was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't get any feedback, so I wasn't sure if I did what you wanted me to do or not." That's fucking Robert De Niro. Performers, they always have that anxiety that they're doing the best job they can do. And in an Edge's situation here, it feels like he's been set up to fail, and he knows that. He's come out from retirement to try and have one last run and try and have one last legendary set of matches to ride home with. And Vince is fucking with him.
And it's not just Vince fucking with him, though. The Edge hasn't had this interview before the match to build the match up with ESPN, who are a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Whatever he says is going to get through to a lot of people, and a lot of people are going to hear it. And it's quite strange in this day and age to hear somebody actively speaking out about the fact that they don't like the promotion of their upcoming match and saying what everybody else is feeling.
I haven't watched Raw yet, but I heard someone else talk about Raw, and they were saying that it's no longer Edge versus Randy Orton, and it's now Edge and Randy Orton versus the marketing department. That
Yeah.
they're both doing the exact same promos they did before WrestleMania, and they're both killing it, to be honest. But I mean, it's just copy and paste. You can sense that they're both annoyed with the situation that they've been put in.
Well, at least you get to see your boy Christian this week.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to tune in just for that. But yeah, but another podcast made the point that it's gone from they now have to put on the best match, which means it's gone from these two having a really hated rivalry to now these two need to work together to put on the best dance possible. We've even lost what the story was about.
I really don't want to see a very old, fragile Edge who's just come back from a neck problem and who hasn't had a proper non-gimmick 15-20 minute match. I really don't want to see him go out there and kill himself. I really don't want to watch him try as hard as he possibly can in front of a crowd of bored performance center students to prove to me that he can have the greatest match of all time because Vince decided to promote it that way. I really hope that Edge realizes that we don't expect that of him, and we know that it's all hype, we know that it's all promotion. They want to go 10 minutes and have a nice send-off to the fact that they're fucking Edge and Randy Orton, just like Robert De Niro is fucking Robert De Niro, then that's fine with me, man.
Yeah, I think now hearing Edge feel quite vulnerable about it, I think I'm just going to completely forget all of this branding going into the match. I'm just going to enjoy it for what it is.
Speaking of actual greatest matches ever,
Yeah.
you gave me Cody Rhodes versus Dustin Rhodes, AEW Double or Nothing 2019, and you gave me Kenny Omega versus Okada at Wrestle Kingdom 11 from 2017.
And that is considered, well, at the time, it was considered one of the best wrestling matches of all time. But then they had a series of matches, and quite famously, their third match, Dave Meltzer gave 7 stars, which annoyed a lot of people and made a lot of other people happy.
Yeah, Dave Meltzer, eh? So Cody Rhodes versus Dustin Rhodes, the inaugural AEW pay-per-view. I'd actually never seen this before. I'd watched the Sledgehammer spot that everybody was talking about and how even you said it was a little bit too on the nose at the time when they hadn't even really got their feet running yet. But looking back now, such a massive pop, man. I don't know whether it's because of the current circumstances, but it's really nice to hear a really hot crowd again.
Yeah, I bet it is.
And this, the Sledgehammer smash still stands up. I thought it was a great moment, even in...
Yeah, man, I liked it and I didn't like it. I thought it was, at the time, I thought it was really fun. It was a statement piece that, because Cody can say these things about WWE because he worked there. I mean, he was, as a wrestler, born there. But at the same time, it was like AEW's first show. They said they're not competing and they just want to do something different. And then that whole show was filled with fuck you WWE moments. It just didn't land right with a lot of fans. And then looking back on it, like a few weeks later, it was like, did they really need to do that? But as a singly moment, it is quite fun.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm looking at this match with fresh eyes. Somehow I missed it. I don't understand how I never saw this, but to me, looking at it now, 1 year on, for the first time, works on so many levels, and it's one of those weird, very rare synergies of fiery crowd to top tier competitors and a really great story, which create that sort of perfect moment, like The Rock versus Austin at WrestleMania 17, like John Cena versus CM Punk at Money in the Bank, where the actual match you can't even really qualify on a Richter scale of how good it actually is, because everything else about it is pro wrestling at its finest. So you're not really looking how many stars it would get, for example, or like the quality of its pacing, or you're not criticizing it in that way because it is the perfect compendium of everything that makes wrestling fantastic. And like the story in itself, there's so many stories here. You've got the beginning of AEW, obviously, it's the first show. You've got the sibling rivalry. You've got the tributes to the dad. You've got the vicious Cody coming out, who's always sort of seemingly been jealous of his brother. You've got the old versus the new. You've got Cody killing the attitude along with breaking the sledgehammer and putting Dustin with the likes of Triple H and the old guard. There's so many things going on here.
Yeah, and I think if I remember back rightly, going into this show, this was the biggest built story with like all the adverts and things they'd put on YouTube. I think, if I remember rightly, the main event was to see who the number one contender would be. It was Jericho and Hangman Page. That had a bit of a build, but other than that, this was like the biggest thing going into this show.
There's some great moments in this as well. Just JR, when JR is passionate, when JR actually cares about something, there's still nobody better in the business. He's sitting there and he's talking about how Cody has a figure four leg lock on Dustin, and how that figure four leg lock is etched in so tight that he could break Dustin's leg. And then Excalibur says, well, if you break a leg at Dustin's age, then you're not coming back, man. And they're just like really selling every single aspect of it. And that's another thing I noticed. The crowd pops for the most basic move, but at the same time, it's not just because the crowd are excited for everything. It's because both brothers are building literally everything up, and there's callbacks to Cody using Dustin's repertoire, Dustin using Cody's repertoire, and then them both using their dad's repertoire. Some of the finest storytelling in a match that I've seen in ages.
If you think about it at the time, I mean, we've seen Dustin have a few matches now in AEW TV, and he's been on a few pay-per-views as well. But at the time, he had just left WWE, and he hadn't done anything of importance for years. So
Yeah.
this was the first time we saw him in just a fantastic wrestling match, back to basics, proper storytelling, real wrestling, no comedy shit. So for the audience live, this would have been I don't even know how to explain it.
I mean, I don't know, but I mean, towards the end of the match, which went about half an hour in itself, he's drowning pretty much in his own blood. And he goes from doing it, he's 50 years old, drowning in his own blood, looks like he's about to pass out, and goes from doing a top turnbuckle suplex into a crossroads. Perfectly.
There's a lot of blood, isn't there? I remember the ring mat just gets soaked, flooded in blood.
I looked into this and it really did look like he bladed, but then that doesn't make any sense to me because he wore red face paint. So like if you knew going in that you were going to bleed, I don't really understand why he wore the color of his blood.
Were they both bleeding, or was it just Dustin?
It was just Dustin, but it was so vicious that towards the end of it, Cody was covered in Dustin's blood
I
as
remember
well.
Cody being covered. No, I only asked because Cody really likes to blade in his big matches.
Well, Cody sometimes likes to blade regardless of whether he needs to or not.
What I really loved about this is that AEW wanted the Elite to all be the good guys. These were the faces of the company. But Cody, for years now on the independent circuit, had been a heel. So this match, he played the heel. The more and more he beat up his brother, the more and more like he respected his brother, and they were falling back in love with each other. At the end, they have that promo where he's like, I need my brother again. And he does this perfect babyface turn.
Yeah, man, what a perfect way to turn face.
Yeah.
I loved everything about this match. Even like down to Christ Almighty, man, straight from 1987 Ric Flair, fucking Cody Rhodes getting his ass out and getting whipped. I bet Dusty enjoyed that one from up there.
I mean, I'm always going to remember this match. This is going to be one of my favorite matches, I think, forever. But I feel like, unfortunately, this is going to be lost to time a little bit. It feels like AEW have already forgotten about those 4 pay-per-views that were there before they started their TV deal on TNT.
I had the choice of watching this in 360 resolution, or I had the choice of watching it in a good quality with an advert every 30 to 50 seconds.
Oh, that's annoying.
So I eventually picked the advert. But what would be your opinion? WWE have just rolled out a free tier network where all Raws and SmackDowns are on it. I know that AEW doesn't have that much material at the moment. I know they're on Fight, but NWA's on Fight. And honestly, I don't really see the Fight thing as a big deal. I think that if they want to move that step forward away from their hardcore fan base, they will eventually need to have their own network and maybe move away from something less niche. What would be your opinion right now on having an AEW network, making all AEW TV episodes free, and then charging like $3.99 for an old pay-per-view and having something like Fight for the Fallen for free just to get the taste of it?
Fight is just pay-per-view, isn't it? So I don't even think you can. There's not like a subscription model for you to watch old shows anyway.
Well, I know that they have live dynamites where they do picture-in-picture.
Oh yeah, but I think you have to be a member of Fight Plus or Gold membership or VIP, whatever, to get those. I don't think there's any way you can subscribe to one company through Fight and you can watch their back catalog. If you wanted to go watch Double or Nothing last year, you'd have to buy it on pay-per-view again.
Yeah, so this was the point. I don't think that given their limited amount of footage, I wouldn't be sure it's a wise idea to put all pay-per-views on a free network right now, because they have to guard the stuff that they do have and is special. But if they did get those and made them more readily available and quite cheap, I think more people would be going back and watching these shows. Because I'm sorry, but I don't think anybody, if they want to go watch Double or Nothing 2019, is going to spend $25 on a year-old pay-per-view.
No, definitely not. I mean, Ring of Honor have their own subscription. Impact have their own subscription. I don't see why AEW couldn't do it.
I know Impact also have all of the last 2 years worth of Impacts for free on their network, just in case you feel like checking something out by them. I think it's a really good idea, and I think that obviously the big criticism of AEW rolling this out would be, well, they don't really have much to show.
Yeah.
But if they just made all of the Dynamites free, they made it sort of like the exclusive place only with YouTube to watch Dark or something, and they gave away some of the lesser shows, like the lesser pay-per-views, for free for people to get a taste. I think it could work well for them.
It could be a good idea, but the whole thing out Dynamite, it probably just depends on what deal they have with TNT. TNT might not allow them to show.
Yeah. I'm not sure, though, because if it works like WWE, then surely they'd be able to get it up within a month or whatever.
Although saying that, on Fight TV, you can watch old episodes of Dynamite. So you can buy blocks of 5 episodes at a time for $5. So I guess they do have rights to put their older stuff elsewhere.
I just thought that going back and watching this match, for example, wanting to watch Cody Dustin, but not wanting to pay $25 for an old show, if they'd had the show on a free network and they say, hey, this is $4, you can go watch it and you can keep it for as long as you want, I probably would have bought it and I probably would have watched the entire show today instead of just that match.
Do they not sell hard copies? They're not selling DVDs on...
No, I think that's dead, bro.
I mean, who buys DVDs nowadays?
Yeah. I think it's something that might be a good idea, just to watch some of the old pay-per-views as they start to build content. But yeah. Anyway.
So next we're going to talk about New Japan match, and I am so excited because like 2 days ago, New Japan announced next week they're going to start running shows again. Man, my life is whole again.
Okay, so for normal people, just explain to us how shows like New Japan works, because I know that they don't have the Western idea of weekly TV, and I know that they have very long tournaments and things, and they don't do things in exactly the same way.
So New Japan have tours, and it works a lot like WWE would run house shows. They don't have a weekly TV show. What they do is they tape kind of the best bits from their tours and they mash that together and then they put the highlights on TV.
Kind of Ring of Honor style.
Yeah, I mean, Ring of Honor is their blueprint is the Japanese style of wrestling. It's very much similar. And what's great about their tour schedule is most of their shows, big multi-man matches. So if they've got a story This is what's great as well. Their stories last over 6 months, a year. They're really long, slow burning storylines. So in these house shows, you'll just have a lot of 6-man tags. A lot of the matches will be the same, obviously, because it's like a house show. You're touring it to lots of different people, and it won't get televised. They'll do that during the week, and then on the weekend they'll have a slightly more important show, which is what in America you'd consider their TV show, and then that will build to the end of the month with the big show.
So, but is that TV show weekly, or is it like more of a like a UFC pre-show sort of thing?
It's the best analogy is a lot like UFC and boxing. They just don't have a structured formula. When they put on shows, they go on TV.
Sure.
It's not structured like a weekly structure like WWE have perfected in America. They put on these tours, and in those tours, there might be 2, 3, 4 more important shows that find it onto TV. And then there'll be 10 lesser shows that will get taped for highlights. But anyway, so you watched Wrestle Kingdom 2017?
Yes, I watched Omega versus Okada. I think the first Omega versus Okada match.
It's the first in their series of hour-long 5-star matches. I think they had.
Okay.
I think they eventually had 4, but there's like a trilogy of important matches.
Well, I enjoyed myself. Kenny Omega initially came out. I thought I'd make this point, and I've always thought Kenny Omega's looks like a bit of a wet wipe. I have to admit, like I've never seen him as like a tough guy necessarily. That might be because of his AEW character these days. Just him drinking milk while Hangman drinks whiskey. He makes a hell of a lot better Terminator than Triple H does. He comes out to a Terminator thing where he steals some clothes from some Japanese blokes and then comes out with like a sawn-off shotgun on his back. And there's a lot of theatrics in Japanese wrestling of the Western guys. I've noticed they go hard into their characters, the Western dudes in Japan.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a package deal. The Japanese like the Western dudes doing their style of wrestling, and packaged in that is the soap opera style presentation.
Sure.
I think, unfortunately, AEW has put too much comedy into the elite faction. So him, the Young Bucks, Cody's kind of been saved from it. So they've all been lessened from the hype that they used to have when they were part of the Bullet Club, because they don't seem as threatening as they used to be.
Honestly, I think my major problem with AEW is that there's too much comedy in general. Considering that they book themselves as the alternate company to WWE, who is long and well known for bad comedy, it seems to be in AEW running rampant over all levels of the card. In WWE, at the very least, you largely have it relegated to the lower and mid cards, whereas in AEW, comedy can be at any point, and is actually more likely to be in the upper tier and main event than the lower, which I find extremely strange.
I've always found it strange how they've booked Kenny Omega, because he was, I mean, I know you might not agree because you were never big on the Japanese style, but he was considered for a long time the best wrestler in the world, or at least the most exciting prospect. Coming into AEW, all of that's been wiped clean, and he's lost it, and they're already treating him like he's this grizzled veteran that everyone else has to prove themselves against him, rather than just having a really solid run of him just being the best. One of those small shows they did in that gym like a month back, and one of those he had a match with, I think it was either Scorpio Sky or Kaz, I can't remember who, and they put on a 5-star match just in this empty gym with no crowd.
Yeah.
And I don't know why Omega's not doing more of that. I think because they reference it a lot, they don't want to NWO themselves, and they don't want to book themselves too strong and make everyone turn on them thinking that they're just booking themselves to win.
This is the problem, though, in my opinion, of the booking in AEW. They have, you're completely right, they have this idea that they don't want to be Jeff Jarrett or they don't want to be Triple H because they've spent their entire careers having a go at the people that book themselves to look good. And now they're finally in a position where they have to book themselves, so they're not booking themselves well, apart from Cody, who seems to be the only guy with a head on his shoulders, What they're forgetting, and what their egos are forgetting, I'm afraid, is that I represent normal people. I've been a wrestling fan for a very long time, and I knew who they were before AEW was around. I'd heard their names. As somebody that follows the wrestling business, if anybody is a name, you're going to know roughly who they are, or you will have seen them. I saw the Young Bucks years ago as Generation Me in TNA. I know I'm aware of these people, but their ego tells them because they're booking to a certain level of fan that everybody knows who they are, and they're already Jeff Jarrett. They're already Triple H. Whereas in reality, non-wrestling fans or very casual wrestling fans will have heard of them for the first time on AEW. And they can self-referentialize all they want, and they can have the commentators talk about their wonderful New Japan matches. But the casual fan, if they book themselves to lose, they're going to look like losers because they don't have the videotape to show us that they're winners. And even if they do, that's in a different promotion. So while I understand the point of them attempting to not book themselves to be Triple H, I'm afraid that they're not Triple H.
Honestly, I think when they first started AEW, they were just booking and promoting this whole thing to hardcore fans that knew who they were. They weren't booking this for the casuals or the upper mainstream that only watch WWE. And then when they got the TNT deal on TNT, they started getting 1 million viewers a week. I think the whole thing blew up way quicker than any of them thought it was going to be. So they were only planning on booking their shows for the people who knew who Kenny Omega was and people who were excited to watch the Young Bucks. But now they're in this situation, maybe because they got Jericho, because they got John Moxley. Their audience is much wider than they thought they would be only a year into this thing.
And that's probably very true. I think that they desperately need to adapt, and they need to adapt soon. What I have seen over the past couple of months, as I told you last week, is that Kenny Omega has become more likable to me. I've seen more of his talent. I'm starting to see him more as a major guy. Same thing with Page. I've always seen Cody as a major guy. Young Bucks not doing themselves any favors, man. Still not doing themselves any favors. Not only do they just not come across as likable to me, but I hardly ever see them wrestle. And when I do see them wrestle, I see them lose.
I actually think we're seeing a slow heel turn on the Bucks. I think because they want Page to be the guy. So although he's being slightly standoffish and heelish in this storyline he's got with the Bucks, I think they want him to be the face of the company in like a year's time. So I think in this story with him, the Bucks are going to actually become the heels.
But just, I mean, forgetting everything that Cornette says or what the Bucks represent to me, or obviously Dave Meltzer, who's now apparently a heel, to me anyway, the Bucks are not fucking likable, man. I don't understand how people can enjoy, like to like them. I don't see anything about them or their characters or their aesthetic which makes me think, hey, yeah, man, I'm a Young Bucks fan. They just come across as annoying, I'm cleverer than you, holier than thou, sarcastic dweebs.
You know what happened, I think? 5 or even 3 years ago, they were a revolutionary new style of wrestling. Whether you love it or hate it, and I know you hate it, but they adopted this new style, which was a stunt show. And before they became famous enough to mainstream fans, the style was adopted by everyone. So now people like you and people and casuals that know this style of wrestling don't see that these guys were some of the very few that were doing it first. I feel like they're not as big as what they would have been.
I don't know, man. I was watching these guys I remember these guys in 2010 when Hogan was in control of TNA, and they were called Generation Me. They had no personality, and they were spot monkeys, and I quite liked them. They had some decent matches. They had some great matches with Motor City Machine Guns. They didn't have any personality, but that's where they were on the card. Now, I've gone away from them. They've gone away from me for a couple of years. They've come back with this self-righteous attitude and this, like, we are massive deals. And I say, okay, show me then. And they don't have anything to back it up. You know, I don't see anything that apparently has changed since I saw them as a rip-off of Jeff and Matt Hardy 10 years ago.
Well, in Japan, they were in Bullet Club. They were bad guys, they were heels. People hated them. So I think maybe they're not slotting into their role as the faces over in America so well. I think they do a very good job at being snobby little brats that you want to hate.
100%. And if you know what, if they change their character to be snobby little brats, I might get behind watching their matches.
Unfortunately, they and Omega, they are the brand. All Elite is built around their faction, so they are the faces of this company.
All Elite aren't very likable though.
I know because they're all
Like
they're all-
even the whole character in itself, the Elite, these don't come across as likable people. They come across as indie Japanese wrestlers who have somehow hit it big and taken Tony Khan's money and are telling everybody how great they
But
are.
that's the point. They were a heel stable in Japan. They were a side faction, if you like, inside the Bullet Club faction, which is meant to be the baddest motherfuckers beating everyone up. They were never good guys. But being the face of the company, you kind of have to be. Same with Cody. Cody's naturally a bad guy. He's smarmy. He wears better suits than you could ever afford, and he's just got this cocky attitude about him. He's naturally a heel, but
And yet Cody is currently the best babyface in the business. So Cody has realized that he's the face of the company and changed his fucking character. Whereas the Young Bucks are still sniveling and telling everybody how great they are while they play on their fucking Game Boy Advance.
yeah, and I think they should be heels. I think they should turn in this Hangman story. Anyway, back to Omega. I think we were to rebook Omega's run in AEW. He should have been hot shit from day one. He should have gone out and I understand their idea of the way they're booking the Elite, but I think he should have gone out and just beat everyone all the time. Not buried people. He should have had those 5-star style matches he had in Japan and made everyone else look good by having awesome matches.
Once again, bro, all I heard about when AEW came in was how great Omega was. And I hadn't watched Wrestle Kingdom and I didn't know fuck squat about fucking New Japan. And all I was told was that Omega is the greatest fucking thing in professional wrestling right now. And what I saw was a bumbling, fumbling, finger-pointing actor who didn't really do much, didn't have a character and kept losing all the time. And it's taken ages in AEW for me to come around to Kenny Omega and say, actually, I kind of really like this guy. And he's had progressively better matches. And obviously, I've started to look back into the New Japan stuff, and he's got a lot to give, I think, to the wrestling industry. They didn't book him like that for a long time. Like, I'm looking at this new thing, this great new wrestler who everybody is raving about, and I just see the same Kenny Omega that you did at the start of AEW without knowing anything about him. So it doesn't give off like a good impression.
Yeah, they definitely dropped the ball. So I sent you to go watch the Okada Omega match. And so you've now seen the Omega that everyone was excited about, the Omega that everyone considered the best in the world. What's your impression of that Omega?
Well, obviously I can't go through the whole match because it's about 52 minutes.
No, let's go. We can go play by play on this.
No.
We got time.
Oh, well, when I first saw this match, when I first saw what you're giving me, I was like, great. Ben's sent me his indie wank.
I want to prove to you that New Japan isn't indie wank. New Japan is the WWE of the Eastern world. And more than that, they're starting to invade. They're running shows in America. They have their own training school in LA, and they did a show in London last year, and they're slowly invading Europe. They're not MLW or Ring of Honor or your
Hey, what are
local.
you saying about MLW? I can't wait for them to come back properly.
Yeah, but they are indie wank. They did a crossover show with AAA, and it was like I was watching some weird hardcore thing out of the 90s. It was awful.
Or Vance Warner or something, yeah.
But what I'm saying is New Japan is a product that's very well professionally shot with some of the best wrestlers in the world. There's a bigger segregation in New Japan than WWE between the top and the bottom of the card. The bottom of the card in New Japan isn't great, but the top end of the mid card and their main eventers are possibly the best wrestlers in the world.
I think to non-Japanese wrestling fans, it's not just the fact that a lot of wrestling to us and us growing up is storytelling. It's not just the fact that we don't understand people that are obsessed with spots. Because there's a certain type of fan which will not radiate towards New Japan and other Japanese promotions. Because for them, wrestling is storytelling and psychology and feeling immersed for that reason. So they obviously don't go to Japan because they can't understand the language. And I think it's a massive step forward that New Japan on this Wrestle Kingdom show as well had English commentary. It makes you more immersed.
Their bigger shows have had English commentary for quite a while now. It's just it's hard to know which shows do have commentary, which don't, because their lesser shows don't have English.
I think another big thing as to why mainstream wrestling fans have a sort of skewed opinion of Japanese wrestling and Western wrestlers that come from Japan is we've been told many times now that somebody's doing great in Japan, man. They're like the best in the world. They're so good right now. You've had Matt Bloom, who became Tensai. You've had Carl Anderson, Luke Gallows, people that apparently have gone over to Japan and completely renewed themselves and become some of the best in the world. They come back here and you don't really ever see what the hype was. And I'm not sure whether that's because Western companies don't use them properly or because what they had was special to a company in which they were not in their native land and therefore it was played off in a different way because they were the Westerners coming in. But it always seems like a disappointment when you finally hear the guy that was like blowing up in Japan and he comes back. There's always seems to be that thing. Even what we were talking about with Kenny, like, and him coming back to AEW and he was like a damp squib in comparison to his Japanese run. There's definitely something wrong there.
It's not even guys coming back, it's the Japanese guys as well. Look at Shinsuke. His entire run in WWE has fallen flat. It's nothing compared to. He was a megastar in New Japan. He was. I don't know how to explain it. If Okada is John Cena, Shinsuke was Randy Orton.
Yeah.
And then look at Kenta and NXT. He fell flat. It didn't work. When he left NXT, he went back to New Japan and he became the hottest thing almost immediately, overnight. On
Yeah.
his first show, he went there. He joined Bullet Club, and everyone that's a New Japan fan, or the Japanese fans, went absolutely crazy. And there's other examples as well. I mean, Asuka, for God's sake, she is maybe the best women's wrestler in the world, and it's taken WWE 4 years to realize the talent that she's got.
She's champion now, but last year or maybe the year before, you didn't see her on TV for about 9 months.
Exactly. And then Carl Anderson, for people that have only watched WWE, it is so hard to explain how important Carl Anderson was. He established the Bullet Club. Maybe one of the most famous factions in the world right now, not ever, right now. They probably sell the most merch right now. Almost every at least indie wrestling fan in the world has one Bullet Club T-shirt, and that was him. He did that, and he was a big deal. He almost won the G1, and when he didn't win it, I can't remember who won it. I think it was against Okada, and that was a big deal. He was the big badass American guy taking the company over. In WWE, he was a tag team wrestler. He just wasn't.
It wasn't even a tag team wrestler, mate. It was a fucking joke. When Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows came into WWE, I remember when they turned up because everybody was like, wow, that's Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows. And I said, why? What's special about them? They started dressing them up in fucking doctors' uniforms for a while.
Yeah.
Then they would lose matches on Superstars. I mean, even when they were given a position, they never really seemed to have much charisma about them. They never seemed to have much of it, which I'd heard them have for so long.
And then those two partnered up with AJ when AJ was the leader of the Bullet Club, and he went over there and he completely transformed himself from the guy in TNA, the baby-faced young guy, the guy we have now in WWE. That transformation happened in New Japan when he was with the Bullet
And yet,
Club.
when Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows are teamed with AJ in WWE, it's my least favorite rendition of AJ in WWE. I spent the entirety of Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows' WWE career just wishing they'd go away.
I think the best way for me to explain it would be, think if Shinsuke never went to NXT. He was so big in Japan, right? You pretend you heard murmurings of him. You knew his name, but you didn't know his work. You didn't really know who he was. That's what AJ would have been to the Japanese people.
Yeah.
So Shinsuke comes into WWE. On his first night, he just lays out John Cena, just murks John Cena. Next Raw, he has a match and wins the championship on that night. And then for the next several months, every time someone tries to win that championship off him, he either cheats, but not overly booked cheats, like simply cheats, or somebody does a small distraction, and he's always gets that one up for months and months and months and months and months. And John Cena is always looking like the fool. WrestleMania the next year, John Cena finally beats him. Finally beats that anti-American heel.
So basically, what you're telling me is Japan actually knows how to book outsiders.
Yeah, basically. That's basically all the Bullet Club is. They're outsiders that are always cheating and they're always pushing the Japanese heroes down. If you like, it's like every Hulk Hogan story ever. Hulk Hogan's always, the American, and the anti-American internationals come in and push him down. That's basically what the Bullet Club is, but for modern day.
Yeah.
And it worked. I don't know, when these guys come over to WWE, either, I don't know, they lose their spark maybe, like you said, because now they're on their home turf. It's not as exciting. But then the same could be said about Shinsuke. WWE dropped the ball on him. He's not exciting. Look at Finn Balor. I said earlier on this podcast, I'm so excited the direction Finn Balor's going in at the moment. He does the gun salute. He's so edgy. This is basically his New Japan character.
I think it'd be really interesting to hear about the next massive Westerner in Japan who's either completely changed their gimmick or has come up from out of nowhere and become like the hottest thing in the industry. And then to see how, because it's inevitable now AEW exists, these guys won't be going to WWE. It'd be very interesting to see how the next hottest thing, the next big thing, is treated when he turns up in AEW eventually down the line.
Yeah, very true.
Anyway, that was a very long and very interesting diatribe.
I don't know. I feel like there's a layer of WWE that purposely tries to muddle all of this awesomeness that's elsewhere.
Well, I think that was one of the most informative and entertaining chats we've had on this podcast, honestly.
Anyway, so just in general, did you enjoy the match?
I really did, and the number one thing that I wanted to take away from this is how expertly they paced the thing. It was, if you're given that amount of time to fill with stuff, there has to be spots in which you're not really doing much. And it was just absolutely mental to me to think about this match in comparison to Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart 1 hour at WrestleMania, which was at least 35 minutes of headlocks. These guys just went balls to the fucking wall for the whole show. And I loved the way that they started feeling each other out for about 10 minutes, 12 minutes in the ring. And then eventually they went outside, got a bit crazy, brought themselves back in. And the whole way through, it really felt like all of the spots actually made sense. And there's some mental spots in this. The moonsault to the outside was crazy. There's a crazy table spot. But the thing that I took away from it was that they actually felt like they meant something, because both of these guys felt desperately like they were trying to beat the other person, which I know sounds crazy, but is actually pretty rare these days,
Yeah.
If I'm going to be picky, I think they went 5 minutes too long for my liking. Right at the end, they went into that spot for spot stuff that I don't like, where they just continually hit each other with knees that 25 minutes ago they were collapsing to, but yeah, I guess you can blame that on adrenaline. Like, by that point in the story, it doesn't really matter. So if you're going to have those spot for spot moments, then you might as well do it in the final flurry. I just came away from this like really having a respect for Omega for putting this match together. Okada looked fucking great. He was delivering fucking German suplexes 46 minutes in, for Christ's sake. That's just, it's just crazy.
Okada is amazing. Well, every match. I mean, every big show, he has an hour-long match, pretty much.
I just came out of this match really happy, because obviously we cover a lot of wrestling on this show, and we watch weekly TV, which you occasionally find a diamond in the rough, but a lot of the time it's the same old shit. And it was so nice to sit and watch after work Cody versus Dustin, and then this back to back, actually be immersed and invested the whole way through. And my ending conclusion to this match was New Japan really know how to put two guys over at the same time, huh?
I'm really glad you enjoyed this, because I didn't think you'd have a problem with the length. I know you're not against long matches, but I was worried that maybe the style you wouldn't be too comfortable with. I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
I'm all up for watching stuff like this when it's that well done.
Yeah, I was trying to push, not an agenda, but I was trying to give you something that I knew you would never watch by yourself.
That's also why you didn't pick the Bucks. You knew I would have told you to fuck off.
I just knew you definitely wouldn't enjoy that. Whereas I think you would like Kenny Omega, but just him when he's at his best, not when I don't know what he's doing right now.
Hey man, I'm getting to like Kenny Omega now. He's finally showing me the tiniest bit of the character that I saw in full flow in this Wrestle Kingdom match. It's progressed since that's overly long, stupid Mox match, lights out match, which I know you liked and I really didn't.
Yeah.
Omega's becoming more of a well-rounded presence on TV for me now, and I'm starting to look forward when I see him on the show.
In that lights out match, did you hear that they got fined by the Athletic State Commission?
Yeah, like 6 months later, right? They got fined quite a lot of money as well.
I didn't even know pro wrestling could be fined by an Athletic State Commission. I thought it didn't govern them because,
I thought it would work.
well, I mean, I mean, I don't want to say this as a wrestling fan, but it's fake. It's not a sport, so I didn't realize the sporting commissions had any say in anything.
I thought the commentators made that bit up.
Apparently, somebody complained to the newspaper. The newspaper took it to the sports commission, who took it to the venue, and yeah, they were slapped with a massive fine, and they couldn't go back into that state for like several months.
What was it for? Bloodletting or?
It was for reckless endangerment, because some of the spots, so like the barbed wire net that they had,
Yeah.
that was fake, but then the barbed wire around the bat and the broom was real, and they were smashing each other with that. And then there was it glass or thumbtacks was used at one point, and then obviously both of them bladed.
Oh, I think it was glass because it made me feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was glass. Both of them bladed. I mean, it was a fucking great hardcore match, but yeah, no. Apparently they got done for that. I didn't even know that could happen.
So you've gone down a very different route.
So the two matches you gave me were from the early 90s, which is an era of wrestling that I absolutely avoid. Saying that, I really enjoyed these two matches, and you've opened my eyes up to a whole new era of wrestling.
This is a big learning experience for the both of us, isn't it? It's like on a TV game show where somebody learns how to be less of a prick, and so does the other person. They become friends.
Yeah, I feel like we both did a really good job of teaching the other person a new style of wrestling. Anyway, so you gave me Mr. Perfect versus Bret Hart from SummerSlam 91 and from King of the Ring 93. The first thing I want to mention is that in the 93 match, the commentators talked about the 91 match, and my mind was blown that they referenced a match that happened like 2.5 years earlier.
Right.
That's just like, whoa. But case in point is, on Raw last night, Charlotte beat Asuka, and they're about to have a storyline, and it feels like the storyline is going to be Asuka doesn't know how to beat Charlotte. She can't one-up her, and we're going to go for weeks or months of Asuka trying to finally get her win over Charlotte. But in December on a Raw, Asuka beat Charlotte. Right now, we can't remember a result that happened a couple of months ago that's important to a story. But back in the early 90s, we could remember a match that happened 2.5 years ago that's not even important to the story. Just a reference.
Yeah. And
It's fantastic. I love it.
they also, at certain points, very subtly in the actual match itself, called back to the SummerSlam 91 match.
Yeah, they did. He did the spot I loved the most was he would kick in the back of his knee, and Mr. Perfect would just like flim himself, like half doing a somersault onto the back of his neck. That happened in both matches. I don't like this style of wrestling mainly because I get annoyed if it's too slow and there isn't enough entertainment happening. I get bored.
Sure.
I'm a 21st century. I got no.
You don't necessarily look for the story within the moves if it's not being sold to you as a story.
Sure, yeah, exactly. I love stories in matches, but it has to be not obvious, but yeah, I guess somewhat obvious. But in this one, it was great because they were doing that style. I guess this was the new. I mean, it is called the new era back then, wasn't
It
it?
was just on the cusp of the new generation, this match.
That's it, the new generation. So I guess this is the new era of wrestlers kind of taking over from the 80s style. They've still got that lots of locks, holds, and submissions, but the pace of the match is faster and there's a lot more running around. And in the first match, it felt like quite a contemporary match. They hardly ever stopped. When they did, say, getting a headlock, Mr. Perfect would be tugging at his hair or doing something. He wasn't just sat in a headlock. There was always something small happening.
That's a big thing with both of these matches, I think. Every single move means so much, and every spot feels like it's carefully plotted and like impeccably executed, even if it may not have been. Which is why I think that Bret Hart and Perfect are able to tell two fantastic stories over two matches without it feeling anything other than effortless. And why they had a promo before King of the Ring 93 where they just talk about one-upmanship, and they don't really matches that I love like this, they don't really need anything, you know? In a way, it is kind of like your spot fests. They don't have to have anything going in to have a good match coming out, but they create a very, very basic story of competition just by the way that they move and utilize every small idea they work in subtly so that you might not even notice it. Sometimes I watch these matches and I haven't seen them for a couple of years, and I remember something. I see something new and tiny that they've done, or like a look on their face, or the way that they're positioned, which is just to me a fucking masterclass of presenting a story without overly bearing it out to the crowd.
Yeah, I mean, what's perfect about this is that neither one of them actually have a full storyline going into them, but it's Mr. Perfect and it's Bret Hart. You know, both of these characters want to be the best, or they are the best, and they have to prove it against each other. So the story is all the smaller things in the match.
It's also the ebb and flow for control as well. I think that's a major part of these matches that stands them apart from a lot of other matches. It's not 50-50 booking like we know about these days. It's not you're gonna make both guys look strong. No, it's like every 5 seconds I've got control, no, you've got control. It makes the whole thing so fluid, and it makes it feel like it's a really big deal if one person or the other person comes out of this with a win, despite the fact that they're not actually angry with each other. As you already said, they just want to be the best.
Yeah.
And that actually makes, for me, a more engrossing story when you get matches like this than if, like, Bret Hart had run over Mr. Perfect's wife or whatever.
Yeah, it wasn't overbooked at all. So in the first match, SummerSlam 91, Bobby Heenan is on commentary and he's playing up that Mr. Perfect doesn't have to win this match. He could just get a count out. He could keep his Intercontinental Championship by just taking a count out. And that does actually play into the match a few times. There's a few times he leaves it out there until about 8 before rolling back in. And then at one point, he does that classic heel move of just walking to the back, and then Bret Hart has to go and fetch him and bring him back. He actually rips his singlet whilst doing that, and then his singlet's just half ripped, and he's pissed. Again, the small things that you said, he's pissed off about his singlet being ripped all the way through the match. He doesn't know what to do with the bit flapping around.
Yeah.
And the commentary doesn't really say anything about it, but they could have played on that he lost the match because he was concentrating too much on his singlet rather than Bret Hart.
Oh yeah, dude, if this was 2020, man, they would have like a PowerPoint presentation in which the bad guy, Mr. Perfect, was talking about the singlet being taken off. You know,
Yeah,
it's just in this, it's just another moment.
yeah, there's layers to it, which is fantastic. And then at the end, Mr. Perfect's dropping low blows between Bret Hart's legs, and then Bret Hart catches it into an ankle lock, kind of folds his leg over and rolls over into the sharpshooter, and then stands up into the sharpshooter. It was maybe the best transition into that move I've ever seen. It was a
Yeah.
great finish.
I'm so glad that you like this match. To me, my favorite part is the start, where they go into this as a competition, and the first sort of 5 minutes is like a show of technical prowess where they're trying to one up each other until eventually it falls into like a quite extended period of hair pulling.
Yes.
Like you don't see hair pulling to that extent anymore. And Bret Hart's like, yeah, I'm a face, but I'm still gonna fucking pull your hair. And then it gets violent, and then Perfect leaves, and then the singlet's torn, and then it gets vicious. And it's just so perfectly paced, you know. This SummerSlam 1991 match is actually one of my favorite matches of all time. I've seen it so many times because as a kid, one of the first DVD sets I had was the Bret Hart set, and this was on it. I wanted to show you the King of the Ring set just to see it as like a sequel in like a callback of how a wrestling rematch is done well if the first match is actually seen as important by the two competitors. But the SummerSlam 91 match for me is one of my all-time favorites.
Yes, this second match I watched at King of the Ring in '93 was, I mean, it was still a really good match, but it wasn't as good.
Yeah.
But it was still a really fun watch. And actually, I accidentally watched the rest of that card while just waiting to do this podcast earlier. And it was the best match on that card.
Just imagine. I mean, I know looking back now that obviously you're going to be a Young Bucks guy. You know, it's the most hottest thing in wrestling right now. I fully accept that. But imagine like sitting in a fucking crowd in 1991 and you watch that, and you know you've got coming up a 6-minute shit fest between like Sergeant Slaughter and Hogan. I think that you would be above anything else a Bret Hart and a Mr. Perfect fan.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, this really feels like this is the new era of the younger guys in the early 90s taking what wrestling was in the late 80s and making it faster, making it more gritty, like with the hair pulling and the brawling. And in the second match, you could definitely see that now they're a bit more cemented on the card. I mean, their storyline of this match runs through the entire show. It was, at least I only watched the second half of the show, and it was the most important thing on the show.
I think it definitely was the most important thing on the show, yeah. Apart from Hulk Hogan getting his face caught on fire by a camera.
Well, I wanted to talk about this. I know it's not the match you sent me to go watch, but I watched Hulk Hogan versus Yokozuna, which was on immediately after, and they definitely should not have followed Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect because the difference in quality was ridiculous. Yokozuna can't sell ice cream to a 5-year-old. And to be honest, Hulk Hogan isn't that much better either. The annoying thing was they were doing this whole, Hulk Hogan can't body slam him, can't pick him up. I mean, this is 93, so what? That's 10 years outdated anyway. I mean, we already know Hulk Hogan can slam Andre the Giant, who's twice the size of Yokozuna. And in this match, I swear Hulk Hogan's actually taller than him anyway. It annoyed me.
So a little bit of context goes a long way here. So I'm not sure you're aware of this sort of period of wrestling.
I've watched WrestleMania 9, so I know about the ending of that.
Okay, so basically, 1992 was Bret Hart's year. He had what many say is the greatest match of all time against British Bulldog at SummerSlam 92. He won the championship from Ric Flair on an untelevised Superstars show, like literally a house show, dropped the belt, then had the WrestleMania 9 match, which Hogan ran out for afterwards and won in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think what happened here, and the reason that Hogan was in the mid-card for some reason, for no apparent reason, and Bret Hart went on to win the tournament, there was a massive falling out between Vince and Hogan. The original plan for WrestleMania 9 was to have Bret Hart beat Yokozuna for the championship, and Bret Hart would go on to be the face of WWE. But then Hogan came calling, and he said, "Hey Vince, I'm going to come back. We're going to do a deal. I'll just come back and be Hogan. It's fine." So Hogan got the belt in 10 seconds at WrestleMania 9. And then within 2 months, mate, honestly, Hogan's like, actually, I want to go to Hollywood and I want to be a film star. So Vince McMahon's like, what, fuck you, you know? I've just given you the belt over the guy that I was bringing up. And now that guy hates me.
Yeah.
So he puts Hogan on the mid-card to sort of get rid of the belt and say, fuck off, I don't want to talk to you. What's also interesting is what happens after this. Obviously, you know, Bret Hart won the King of the Ring. And instead of going back to face Yokozuna, which would make sense after the stupid Hogan stuff, Vince decides that he needs another Hulk Hogan. And this is where that really, I'm not sure whether you're aware of it, but the really, really bad era of Lex Luger trying to be the next Hulk Hogan thing comes in.
Yes, I love Lex Luger for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, so he had, throughout the summer of 1993, he had the Lex bus, where he'd travel around the country on his Lex bus, talking to kids and being a great role model. And by the time that it came round to Lex Luthor actually winning the championship from Yokozuna, Vince McMahon realized that nobody gave a fuck. And just for your own amusement, you have to go back and watch Yokozuna versus Lex Luger. They scrapped the idea of Lex Luger winning the championship and being the next Hulk Hogan because nobody wanted to buy Lex Luthor's action figure. But what they did do is have Lex Luger celebrate his loss in the ring with like 10 different people.
Right. So celebrate.
It's a great moment. Yokozuna wins. But for some reason, Yokozuna leaves like he loses, and then everybody from the locker room comes out and puts Lex Luger on their shoulders.
Okay. Well, okay. I mean, I feel bad for Bret Hart because at the end of this King of the Ring, obviously he wins the tournament, and then the King, Jerry Lawler, comes out and just beats the shit out of him. And I even texted you. I was like, Vince must fucking hate Bret Hart because this.
Yeah, like it started another bad
Yeah, I mean,
feud
this whole
for Bret Hart.
series of years, Bret Hart just keeps on getting put down and put down, even when he's clearly the best thing. I mean, I know I'm not exposing anything new here. We all know this, but what I found really strange was I didn't realize this was a couple of months after WrestleMania 9 when I first watched. So Hulk Hogan loses his World Championship against Yokozuna, and then the next match after that is Shawn Michaels defending his Intercontinental Championship. And then when I saw the rundown of matches, I was like, that's weird. Hulk Hogan is lower than Shawn Michaels in the early 90s. And then you said to me, that's Hulk Hogan's last match in WWE before he goes to WCW. It's really weird watching him go out in that way. It was a screwy finish, and then he just gets pulled out of the ring and then helped backstage, and then that would be the last we see of Hogan.
Yeah, it really was Vince McMahon saying "fuck you" to Hulk Hogan.
Just an unceremonious way of leaving. It's just such a for like the biggest guy in wrestling ever. His way of leaving was really weird.
The whole run was weird, man, because the 92, his last WrestleMania match before that 10-second thing at 9 was against Sid. And then there was like a big steroid trial.
Yeah.
And they just took Hogan off TV after WrestleMania 92. And he only came back in like late February 93. And he only came back for basically for the cash. And it was very, very, very obvious. And he had 2 pay-per-view matches, WrestleMania 9 and King of the Ring. So he had like a weird tag team match on WrestleMania 9 with Brutus Beefcake. If you go back and watch that period of Hogan, it's like one of the weirdest periods of Hogan. Just this really short, really strange 1993 run, which everybody forgets about, where he looks kind of like emaciated as well. He looks skinny and.
I mean, I was about to say that says a lot that this run was after the steroid scandal because he looks a lot slimmer.
Yeah.
And a lot less toned.
Yeah, it's just like probably one of the most forgotten periods of Hogan, and it only lasted like 5 months, but it is quite surreal when you have this image of Hogan before he became Old Man Hogan or before he became WCW NWO Hogan, and you just always assume that he was like guy that faced Andre the Giant, you know. But hey, 1993 is not the worst year in WWE. If you ever want to talk about the worst matches of all time, you get yourself to 1995.
Say it gets worse, doesn't it? We
Oh
go
man,
downhill
1995, your King of the Ring and WWE champion at one point is King Mabel.
Yes, yeah, I've actually seen that.
You have Undertaker versus Undertaker.
Oh, I think Diesel debuted at this King of the Ring 93.
Oh, did he?
I don't know if he debuted, but he was definitely new because the commentators had to explain who he is and why he was the bodyguard of Shawn Michaels.
Apparently, Shawn Michaels was watching WCW one night and he saw a guy called Vinny Vegas, phoned him up and said, "Hey, do you want to come be my manager?" And Vinny Vegas was working hand to hand at WCW, so he didn't have to like leave a contract or anything. And he was on WWE TV 2 weeks later. You can tell I've spent too much time watching, listening, and reading about this period, despite the fact that it's probably overall one of the worst periods in wrestling.
It's largely considered that because like the Jim Cornettes, the older folk that love the 80s, and then you get people that love the Monday Night Wars, and then people that love, like me, that love the Attitude Era, and then you've slapped yourself right in the middle when nobody else talks about.
I think it's half because nobody else talks about it, and it's I think majorly for the same thing that you talked about quite a few hours ago, in the fact that this stuff was cheaper. And I had a weird collection of tapes. I had SummerSlam 96. I had In Your House 5, I think. And I had a Bret Hart set. And it wasn't really that I came out and sought after this period of wrestling, because why would you? You know?
Yeah.
It's more that it was available to me and I grew up on it, which is weird because I was 1 when it was coming into fruition. Like 1995, I was 1. So I grew up with a wrestling age that wasn't mine.
Yeah. You know what's a great shame is that I've not watched more Mr. Perfect matches, and I probably should.
Mr. Perfect's great. Sometimes you could phone it in, but largely, if you see Perfect against a name that's not Mr. Hughes or Mabel, then you're going to get a good match. And it's a fucking tragic shame about what happened to Mr. Perfect, because he had kind of surreal now, and I'm not sure you remember it, but he had a big run in at Royal Rumble 2002. It was his first time back in WWE since around 93, 94. And he was being positioned to do great things. And then obviously he wasn't turning up on time, and he was turning up intoxicated and things like that. So he became, for a long time, enhancement talent on Heat in 2002, straight up just before his death. And it's crazy to think about what an older veteran Mr. Perfect could have done against guys like Angle.
That would have been some cool matches. And then the same goes for Bret Hart. Not so much now because I've watched a lot more Bret Hart matches, but 10 years ago or so, everyone was like, "Oh, Bret Hart's like one of the best ever," and I was like, "Is he really?" Obviously, now I've gone back and watched some more stuff, and I've read into things like what we talked about today, where he was always pushed down and he wasn't quite given the rub, and he wasn't given the main event spot as early as he should have been. But when I was a kid, I saw that he main evented a couple of times, but he was never like Shawn Michaels or Hulk Hogan.
Well, he was to me, though, because that's exactly the age that I was watching when I was growing up. This period where, like, SummerSlam 96 to 97, where he actually starts to become like the veteran of the locker room, and he's going against Taker and he's going against Michaels, and he's doing these great main event matches. And I think the thing with Bret Hart is that a lot of people, you're not alone in your opinion, where people say, "Oh, Bret Hart's overrated." Like
I
everybody.
don't think he's overrated. I think as in ring, he is as good as people give him credit for. What I meant was, as a kid, the WWE or fans would always be like, Shawn Michaels did all these great things, Taker did these great things,
Oh
Hulk
yeah,
Hogan
yeah. Well, obviously because of the screw job, right?
I guess so, but I just feel like Bret Hart was always in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had his main event push back when, as we just said, WWF was at its worst that nobody talks about. And then when he went to WCW, he had an ill-fated run, and NWA was pushing everybody down.
I mean, his WCW career, even before it got shortened and finished by Goldberg, it was the shits, man. It was the shits when he came in. This is another thing I mentioned like 2 weeks ago. They booked him as special guest referee and shit for months. He just seemed like an afterthought that they'd picked up because they had the money. And it's Bret Hart, out of anyone really in the industry, is the craziest. What if things had been different? What if things had changed? Because again, imagine a Bret Hart that could still go at Edge's age, getting old, that grizzled old veteran going against fucking guys like Edge, guys like Ray, guys like Angle. These guys versus Bret would have been amazing.
Yeah, well, Shawn Michaels was still going with those guys. Think if Bret Hart had the longevity that Shawn Michaels did, he would have had matches with all those people. Think of him versus Eddie Guerrero or Chris
Yeah.
Benoit or just classic mat wrestlers or Kurt
They would
Angle.
have been absolute classics. There are a couple of classics already of Bret and Chris Benoit. It's some of the few great matches that he ever had in WCW. A young Chris Benoit versus Bret Hart. There's some good stuff there.
Yeah, I just feel like if he was in a slightly different position in a slightly different time, I don't know. If some things had gone differently, he would have been like. I know he's already a big star we always talk about, but I mean like a mega star that we put on a pedestal like Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair and Hogan and Taker.
Yeah,
I feel like he never quite. There's a glass ceiling there, He never quite hit
he did. He
the
did.
upper.
He never got to that level. He got to the level where I think I can only ever really see Randy Orton getting to.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's a good comparison.
But anyway, this was a good pod.
Yeah, I had fun with that. I had fun with watching these matches.
So did I. I
We
had
should
fun watching yours. Nice to talk about my old man wrestling for once, and I'm sure it's nice for you to talk about your indie wank.
Oh, there it is again. So next week, are we going to watch that Ric Flair thing?
I think this is actually my most look forward to podcasts yet, and I'm going to do some heavy fucking research.
Like, share, and subscribe to keep it botched up, brother.